Hey, everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. So, leaders, how do you lead yourself? And do you realize that that is absolutely the first thing that you should be doing, leading yourself? Well, I got to talk to high performance leadership and coaching expert Dr. Stacey Ashley, and wait till you hear the things that she talked about when it comes to first leading yourself. She'll give you some tools and strategies that you can use. She'll talk about how resilience is so important, how self-support and having that self-care is vital to your success, and how you can take all that and make sure you have a deeper connection with your teams. You don't want to miss a second of this. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. And I have got a terrific guest tonight, and we are going to stay on a topic. And I can't wait because this is such an important topic for leaders. So I want to get right to it. I want to introduce high performance leadership and coaching expert, Dr. Stacey Ashley, to the show today. Stacey, it is so great to have you. How you doing?
I am great and really excited about our conversation, Kenny.
Yes, absolutely. I want to also mention that Stacey is an author among a lot of other things, and she's going to talk about something coming up this week. We'll get to that in just a bit. And first, Stacey, we're going to talk about how leaders should first lead themselves. And I want to get some of your backstory first, though, and then I want to really ask you how you came to do that for yourself. So tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Gosh, backstory. That's a really big question, isn't it? So I think I can just say I've sort of been in leadership forever, whether it was sport or school or, obviously my career. It's just been this continuous theme. And I think my dad was a particular mentor in the leadership space. And so it's been something that's just been a part of my life, forever. And now, of course, I'm working with leaders in a variety of industries and mostly at the senior level these days, but obviously started working with emerging and middle leaders as well.
Yes, awesome. So now, as you're on this career path, when did you realize? What was that moment like for you where you said, "Hey, I got to lead myself first before I can even think about leading a team"? How did that start to all occur for you?
Yeah, it's I don't know whether there was a particular moment, but I think it's like the accumulation of observation and experience. And I don't know what it's been like for you, Kenny, but what I noticed with the leaders that were around me is, I think sometimes I just expected a little bit more, and I was sort of like, they were nice people, but I just felt like maybe they weren't quite sort of stepping in and embracing the concept of leadership. And so that sort of did lead me to kind of consider, like, what is missing? What's not happening? What am I not seeing? And a lot of it was that they weren't leading themselves. So they had expectations of others, how they would perform, how they would show up, and they didn't actually apply those expectations to themselves. Mm-hmm. And so there was this sort of gap. And I think, when we look to our leaders, we do want to be inspired and we do want to go, oh, that's what leadership looks like. That's how leadership acts. That's how leaders, make decisions and behave. And I feel like sometimes we look to our leaders and perhaps that's not quite there. And so for me, that question of, would I choose to follow you when you're clearly not actually leading yourself? Was a big one. And I think, if we want to engage our people and we want them, to trust us and all of those things, we need as leaders to be leading ourselves and sort of, showing that example of leadership and role modeling. And so if that's absent, I feel like we're kind of letting the people down around us, but also we are not being the best leaders we could be because we're just not showing up like that. And so I think it sort of crystallized to me in first lead yourself. Really, you've got to do the work. You've got to really embrace leadership, be responsible for yourself as a leader. And then that kind of cascades over into you really positioning yourself well as a leader and being seen by others as a leader.
I got to tell you, that's really amazing what you just said. And I see it happen so often on the opposite end. And especially the example setting and the role modeling, which is so important. But we sometimes expect that without teaching people how to really lead themselves and take care of themselves. So I'd love to get into now some practical tools that that leaders can start. So I'm a new leader starting out, and I'm worried about this team, right? I've got this team that just is not performing. I've taken over a store that's underperforming, and I'm worried about them. But your point is you got to really start with yourself. So what are some practical ways, practical tools where leaders can start?
Yeah, great question. And so this is actually one of the things that I cover in my first book called The New Leader. And it's really about some of those practical leadership lessons that really our experienced leaders should be passing on. So here's just a couple of examples. The first one is, quite simply, get yourself organized. Really be clear about what are you supposed to be doing? When are you supposed to be doing it? Don't do the things that are just busy work that sort of suck up your time. Do the things where you actually make a difference as a leader, because that's going to help you get clarity, get focus, put your energy into the right things that actually in 6 months' time you go, yes, that made a difference. But also in terms of your thinking and your attention and that sort of thing, you are able to make really good, clear decisions about what's important. You're able to role model that you are doing the things that are important, and that's good for your team to sort of see and notice, because, hey, they might sort of follow that role modeling of focus on the important. And also, I don't know about what you've noticed, but often when people go into new roles like that, they get very overwhelmed. There's a lot to do. As you said, maybe their team is demanding and their boss is now demanding more. And so we have to have that clarity so that we can actually get on with things rather than just being in this state of overwhelm. And it gives us the ability to say, actually, I'm not going to do that now, or actually just no, because it's not important enough. I'm really going to focus on the things that are important. And so you're leading your own, ability to deliver and to focus on the things that matter. And you're helping your team to understand what matters and is important too.
Wow. And those are such great tools and great advice.
So that's one. I've
Well,
got more, but
no. I want you to keep going. I'll ask after.
Okay.
Please keep going. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first one. Get really, really clear. I think that one of the second ones is that, of course, you do have to look after yourself. So as leaders, we're always attention out. So we do have to be a little bit attention inwards, to monitor things like your boundaries. How long is a day of work? What do you do? What don't you do? Set those boundaries, set those precedents. And most of the time stick to them. Yes, there'll always be exceptions, but I think we need to be clear about what we will and won't do, that whether it's the timing, whether it's where you work, whether it's how responsive you are to people. This whole concept of I've got to respond to an email or a text or whatever straight away. Well, maybe I don't. Maybe there are certain times in the day that I do that rather than it interrupting me all the time. So set your boundaries. So that's another one that I think is really important. And part of the boundary setting is getting time away from work to replenish and restore and do the things you love, and, spend time with other people that are not work people, and so I think that's really important, particularly after the last few years. And then the third one I would say, because I don't want to go on for too long, but the third one I would say is, it's really about having those important conversations. And they're not necessarily all bad conversations. They're not all about, I've got to give you feedback that you're not going to really love. It's about the important conversations around when I'm working with a new team or I've come into a new situation. Let's have a conversation about our expectations of each other. What do you expect of me as your leader? What do I expect of you as a member of my team? Because that stops us making assumptions that can get us into trouble later. So, expectations conversations, it is important to have performance conversations. So we're kind of all on the same page. And if there are gaps, we can work towards closing the gaps of performance. And of course, feedback conversations, not just about this isn't going well, but the feedback conversations about this is going really well. Do more of that. I think is such an important thing. And as a leader, what you're saying to your people is I'm noticing, I'm appreciating, I'm valuing. And that is so important in terms of creating trust and connection and demonstrating leadership. As your leader, I'm noticing the contribution that you make. And it's such a powerful thing, as we all know, for people to feel like their leader is paying attention.
Wow. Wow, those are 3 amazing tips. And so here was the question that was popping in my mind. I apologize, it popped in a little bit too fast. And I love, because you said first getting organized, which I think is such an important piece. But what I find, especially new leaders, is that they're very selfless. They're worried about everybody else. What are some other hints and tips for you to be a little bit more inward, and really worry more about yourself first, and then really recognizing, where you need to improve, because, especially in this remote world, and, you're not going to get that feedback all the time. I love that you said we should be giving it. How do you help leaders get past that point?
Sure. So I think there are kind of 3, this is the component that I call facing up to yourself, like really, really, becoming more self-aware so that you can then do more of the good stuff, less of the not so good stuff, and build out, the gaps. The first thing is just to really observe yourself, notice yourself. So reflection from time to time, doesn't have to be a lot of time, but how did the day go for you? For example, at the end of each day, how did the day go? What went well? What perhaps could have been better? What did you notice about how you showed up into situations or how you responded? And what were you happy with, and what maybe do you need to focus on to improve? So that's the first thing, just notice. And do that on a regular basis. So whether it's 5 minutes a day or once a week or however you do it, or even just after the moment, after a meeting, that meeting didn't go as well as I would have liked, or I didn't get the outcome that was, that I wanted. So what do I notice about how I contributed to that outcome or to that meeting? So that's the first thing, just sort of notice. The second thing is the feedback. So if you're not getting feedback, be really specific and focused on eliciting feedback. Ask people, what am I doing well? What needs improvement? How can I really help you as your leader? Being clear, of course, that it's not your job to do their job, but as the leader, how could you be of service, to your team? And so really getting that specific feedback and looking for the opportunity, not getting down on yourself because everything's not perfect, because we're all a work in progress, but going, what's the opportunity for me here as a leader? And then the third thing, of course, is that we can get sort of independent information, if you like. So that might be profiling, it might be, doing some kind of an anonymous survey with your people, those sorts of things. So we can get subjective, our own observation, we can get, or hopefully not too subjective, but our own observation, we can get observation and feedback from others, and then we can get independently sort of sourced information, and that can all go into the mix of what's my opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all those steps, and you mentioned getting into these really good habits, all those steps, you'll start to realize that if I'm taking care of myself, I'm taking care of my team. I'm leading myself, I'm going to lead my team better.
Absolutely.
Those are awesome tools. There's a couple of words that you use that I really want you to go into a little bit more. One is self-support, and the other is resilience. Tell us a little bit first about going a little deeper in supporting yourself.
Yeah, I think so there's a couple of things. Having an awareness of self means that you can get some insight into, how and when you do your best work. What sort of conditions under which you do your best work, or what are your strengths? Because I find particularly people going into new roles, in a leadership sense, they often try to emulate the person that was in the role before them, rather than going, well, actually, that person's a little bit different to me. So perhaps I can execute this role using my strengths, using what I know, using my experience. Of course, we want to learn from others, but trying to be something you're not is really hard work. So to support yourself, how can you really access and use the things that you are good at, that you enjoy doing, that you have experience in, and that are your particular strengths that bring you energy, because you're going to be much more successful in your role. And that's really supporting yourself. I think the other thing that goes with that, of course, is to make sure you've got a really good support structure around you, like a really, really great network of, and that's not about a huge network, but a supportive network of friends and colleagues and family and team members inside and outside the organization that you can reach out to, you know, to get information or to bounce an idea off, or just to, you know, have a conversation about, wow, I'm not having a great day, but I thought I'd just spend a couple of minutes with you because I know that that will refresh me, and, you know, I'll get some new insight. So that's, and then the third thing I would say is being really deliberate about how you kind of recharge yourself. You know, people put a lot of time and effort into their work, and so we equally need to put a lot of time and effort, you know, into ourselves, other aspects of our lives, to deliberately replenish and, you know, create that renewal, if you like, which is a real self-support. And it will be different for everyone. You know, it might be spending time with family and friends. It might be doing yoga. It might be riding your horse. It might be whatever, going out in nature. It's different for everyone, and how much we need is different for everyone. But being really conscious and conscientious about yourself.
Yes.
You know, what do you need to do to replenish and yourself, so you have great energy, so you can turn up as the leader that you want to, you know. And that's about every day, every week, every month, being deliberate about how you spend your time on yourself and the things that you do.
Stacey, and that's amazing advice, by the way. What if I have some setbacks? How does that play into this? Because what I will normally see, I've got this great plan, I'm organized, but now I've had a couple of bad months, and oh man, I got to hit my numbers this month, or I'm going to be in trouble. And now they, you know, veer a little bit on course. What are some hints and tips to really stay the course, even when there is? And I think this is where resiliency ties in.
So many things. I think one of the dangers of being a leader at any level is to think you have to solve every problem yourself. And so get over that. That's the first thing. And actually, you know, tap into your team, the people around you. You know, they have great ideas. So asking really good questions about, what do we need to do differently? What else can we do here? What is working? How can we build on that? Because if we've hit a rough spot, or we're trying to solve a problem and it's not happening, clearly we can't just keep doing the same thing. So I think that that's really important as a leader, to let go of the idea that you have to know the answer to everything, because you really don't. And it's a heavy burden to carry if you think that you do. So from a resilience perspective, again, reach out to the people around you, you know, involve them in problem solving and being creative and brainstorming together. So use the resources around you. That's the first thing I would say. The other thing I would say is that while maybe you didn't hit a number in a particular month or a series of months, doesn't necessarily mean that you are not making progress. And so I think that's one of the other things that is really important, is the goal, hitting the final goal, is not the only measure of progress. And so we need to recognize the things that are contributing to where we want to go. And so, for example, if we have to change a process in the middle of a year, then maybe for a couple of months while we actually re-engineer the process and that sort of thing, we don't hit our numbers because we're actually building new capability. And so that's diverted our resources and our attention. But when we have the new process in place, it actually means our ability has been increased. And so going forward after that, we can really hit our numbers.
Yeah.
So, let's contextualize a little bit as well. It's not just we missed the goal. Maybe there are other things going on that are contributing to future progress, and we need to recognize those.
Mm-hmm.
What else from resilience? I think that, again, taking time away from the problem or the challenge is really useful for us. So if we have a situation and all we do is we focus on the situation, we don't give ourselves space to do things that are not that situation. And sometimes the solution is actually somewhere else, and so give yourself permission to not focus on the problem, even if it's just for a little while, because sometimes, I don't know how many people have had an idea when they're out for a walk or they're in the shower or something like that. So we're not actually focused on the thing that we're trying to do. We're completely doing something else and it comes to us. And so I think giving yourself permission away from the challenge or the obstacle or the low numbers or whatever it is, often helps to facilitate progress in our thinking and solving the challenge.
Oh, no question. That was all three of those are just amazing. And you look at resiliency as very, very important, and that we really need to bounce back and gotta, especially in our workspace today. I love this expression, and I wanted you to expand on it a little bit. Connection with your tribe, and that's a big deal for you. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Absolutely. So I think certainly, and I'll contextualize this a little bit. We've been through a really interesting few years, and the workplace has changed significantly. And so what we're seeing is, teams are more dispersed and they're not necessarily working in the same location all of the time, and that sort of thing. Now, in certain industries, it's not to the same degree, but I think what happened is that we perhaps lost some connection during periods of time when we were apart. And the skills and the confidence in creating connection were a little bit diminished as well, because we didn't exercise them, we didn't practice them. We've also got lots of new people coming into the workplace. They don't know, they haven't had experience of building connection and being part of a team in a workplace. So I think in order for teams to operate well, in order for leaders and teams to come together, we need to actually be really deliberate about creating connection. Because what does connection give us? And what do I mean by connection? Connection is not just that we communicate, but that our communication is valued by us, and it creates an understanding and a knowing between us. And when we have that and we start to build that trust in our relationship and a bit of engagement in how we work together, and starts to contribute to connection, then of course our ability to work together, to understand each other, to support each other, to solve problems together, to collaborate, all of those things, of course, elevates. And so we can do really great work. If we don't have connection, it's really hard to get stuff done. And as a leader, it's really hard to hit your numbers if you don't have connection with your team, and they don't know what's going on, and they don't know what's important, and they don't really trust your leadership. So that's a big one. Do I trust that you will be my leader? And so connection and working towards having really strong connection, I think, is a real foundation piece of good leadership. And if my team knows I'm going to lead them, or your team knows that you're going to lead them, then they're much more willing to participate in the work and contribute to whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. The level of productivity and performance, all those things that we know we need to deliver our results, is going to go up. But we've got to put effort into it. And people value, we're humans. Humans work in groups. They socialize in groups, at least some of the time. And so if we can create and foster connection with the people around us, our tribe, the people we interact with, the people we influence and who influence us, then we're going to have much better chance of thriving together than trying to survive alone.
Yeah. Oh, no question. No question. And it really, I mean, everything that you said before that, I'm not sure that a really good leader, because you said at the beginning, one of the things that inspired you, not in a great way, but inspired you to become the leader that you became, was because you saw other examples of not so great leadership. And I think the leading yourself first, I'm not sure that you're going to be great at connecting with others if you haven't really gotten to know yourself and have that self-discipline to lead yourself first. So it's all brilliantly connected. Stacey, this has been amazing. I want to ask one more question, and then I want to give time for you to reveal something, as well as tell folks how they can connect with you. I've got to say, the number one reason I wanted to do this podcast, and I did when I was with T-Mobile for several years, and then after I left, wanting to do this was because I don't see a lot of leaders developing themselves or leading themselves because they always say they don't have the time. And so, what hints and tips do you have? Because you strike me that you develop yourself every day, that you're doing something that's going to, enhance your learning and enhance your leadership every day. What are some hints and tips from you for leaders out there today that say, I don't have the time to develop myself?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that, if you put time into it, you're going to get that time back over time. And so that's the first thing I would say.
Yeah.
Make time.
Yeah.
Everyone has the same number of hours in the day.
Yeah.
It's a choice, right? It's a decision. What's most important to me?
Yeah.
Is it important to just, sort of half turn up and do the job, but not elevate the way that you're doing the job? So in 6 months' time, actually the job is easier, you have more grace, you have more time, you get more outcome, and it's a choice. So is it important enough to you to develop yourself so you can really show up as the leader that you want to be? And if it is, then it doesn't have to be a huge amount of time. Maybe it is on the commute home, a little bit of reflection about the day. Maybe it is a couple of times during the day asking one of your colleagues, your team members, how can I help you, in your career or with this particular task? What would make it easier, as your leader? How can I contribute to that? It might be asking your team members for ideas in terms of how the team operates. So what else could you do? I mean, of course, there are amazing podcasts and books and, articles, and there's so much actually information out there. You have to be quite selective in terms of sort of narrowing your scope.
Yes. Yes.
But even, this is a question that I ask to a lot of my senior leaders, and I think it can help to inspire where you want to focus your leadership and where you want to focus your development, which is, at the end of this year, what would you like your leadership narrative to be? Mm. And by that, what I mean is, if someone was telling a story about you as a leader, what would you like them to say?
Wow. I love that. Yeah. I get a lot of blank stares when I ask, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to be known for? And that's very thought provoking. But if you're starting with developing yourself, it all goes back to that. And if you're starting with leading yourself and everything you said, from organization to being intentional, you'll know the answer. Stacey, this has been amazing. What great advice you have, and I'm so glad we stayed on this one topic. You gave so much great information. I'll say this real quick, and then I want to leave it back to you. And towards the end of my tenure with T-Mobile, there was I had a national audience, but there was a good time where I supported folks in New York City and in Boston. And I used to ask them, man, how do you get to work? You driving in, right? Or you jumping on the train? You can't pop your headphones in and listen to a podcast for like 15 minutes and gain a lot from it. Imagine folks, in New York City listening to what you just said on their commute in the morning, and how much they get. That's self-development, so
right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have something to reveal. You've written 5 books, and we've got something cooking. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought it's been a little over a year since I wrote a book, so I better write another one. This new book is coming out imminently, and I'm really excited. Actually, it's a real encapsulation of the change that's happened in leadership, the evolution of leadership, to really be a lot more encompassing and to be a lot more responsible for the people and for the future. We can't just go through the motions and hope everything will be okay. Leaders need to be active in creating the future. And so this book, Big Leadership, is going to be available very, very soon.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And please let me know when it's out. I'd love my copy because it sounds like a topic I would love to read about, especially after meeting you and talking to you. So Stacey, how can people get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, Stacey Ashley. My website is staceyashley.com. And yeah, love to hear from people.
That's awesome. Okay. And I'll make sure that's in the show notes, folks. So you'll have all of that info. Stacey, again, this has been amazing. I thank you so much for your time. Thank you for getting up early with me and sharing so much of yourself and so much great tips for leaders out there today. Thank you so much.
My great pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, absolutely. Well, folks, I'm going to leave it there. This is Kenny and Stacey. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.